Shalom, everybody, and welcome back to Insights in the Parsha of the week. It's a power-packed Shabbat, Parshat Vayakhel-Pekudei, Chazak, finishing the book of Shmot, and Parshat HaChodesh, the fourth Parsha Shabbat preparation for the month of Nisan Bezrat Hashem. We'd like to go into some insights in Vayakhel, and because Rashi himself says in his commentary on Vayakhel, I've already explained the various parts of the tabernacle in Parshat Truma and Tetzaveh, so we're going to use some of Rashi's commentary from Truma, which is related to what's written in this week's Parsha in Vayakhel. So in the Parsha, we'd like to go into the various coverings of the Mishkan, of the tabernacle. The first covering itself was called Mishkan, which was the 10 Yeriot of fabrics with beautiful designs made from crimson wool, tchelet, argaman, all these very interesting colors, and they were colorful. There were 5 strips with various lengths and widths and measurements, and the 5 were joined, and the other 5 were joined to make 2 groups, and then they were joined with krasim, like these pegs, and also lulaot, loops, on both ends to join them to make them 10. This covering was the initial cover over the actual Mishkan, the tabernacle. So that means it faced the roof of the tabernacle was this first covering. It's called the Mishkan because of that, because it's covering the tabernacle, so it gains the title of the Mishkan itself, which means Hashem's dwelling place. And they were exposed to what's in number 1, Holy of Holies, the Ark, and also what's beyond that, which is the menorah, the showbread, the Ketoret altar, and then the whole section of the Kodesh and Kodashim were covered by these coverings called the Yeriot. Okay, so there were 10. The commentaries say that 10 represent, and that it's 5 and 5 joined together. It's again a symbolism of the Shtei Luchot HaBrit, the 2 tablets, and 5 on each, 5 commandments on each. Okay. The joining place where they met, in other words, where the 50 loops and the 50 pegs joining the 2, was exactly over the parochet, which separated the Holy of Holies from the Holy. So even there, on the covering, there is a separation. A lot of details of Nosin and the Likutey Moharan brings into that specification of the joining of the 5 plus 5 to make 10, being exactly over the parochet. Now that's the first covering. Over that was another covering, which had to be a bit longer, so it covered entirely this cover, which was so beautiful, and was only being able to be viewed from inside the Mishkan. The second covering is called Yeriot Izim, made from the hair of goats, and it was done in an amazing way. Rashi says in this week's parsha, it was the threads were already braided. And in an amazing, this is very hard to understand, but there were expert women who knew how to do this, that while the hair of the goat was still on the goat, they already braided it to make threads. Can you believe that? And after that, after they slaughtered it, and afterwards they lavshit, they took off the skins of the sheep and they joined them together. There's various opinions. Some say it was a giant one sheep, and the whole thing was made from that. Others argue with that opinion in the Midrash. But whatever the case, this upper cover is called Yeriot Izim. Here, there wasn't 5 plus 5 like the ones underneath. There were 6 and 5, okay? And again, also, one group of 6, one group of 5, with 50 loops, 50 pegs, an exact same location as what's underneath it over the parochet, okay? So the question is, the 6th one is longer. It's much longer. It's an additional one. What's it used for? So Rashi says, let's take a look in Parshat Truma. When Rashi talks about this 6th additional strap of the Yeriah, of the Izim from the hair of the goats, what's it for? So he says, the pasuk says, this is in Truma. We're just looking at the Rashi in Truma, chapter 26, verse 9. The verse reads there, right? V'chibarta et chamesh Yeriot levad. You should join the 5 by themselves. And then the Ve'etashesh Yeriot Levan joins the other 6 together by themselves. And then afterwards, like we said, they're joined together. That's another verse. But it says about the sixth one, which the question is, it's long, it's hanging over. That sixth one is facing the entrance to the oil, to the actual tent of meeting, where you have the menorah, the showbread, the mizbach of the Ketoret, the incense altar. So there, it's folded over that entrance. So look what Rashi says. It's folded over. Ha'odefet, verse 9. Ha'odefet be'elu aliyonot yoter min ha'tachtonot. This sixth one, which is over, which is more than what's underneath, because the ones underneath had only 10. This one has an extra one. Why is it needed? You have to fold it el mul pnei ha'oel, folding it facing the entrance to the tent. Chatzi rochva hayatalui. Half was hanging, but half tuck it in. It had to be folded back. Half of this extra sixth one, this sixth strap, half of it is folded, and meaning half of it will be hanging out. What purpose does that serve? So it's folded back at the entrance on the east side facing the entrance. Similar to a modest kala who just got married. She's wearing a head covering to cover her hair, which is the modesty of a Jewish woman. Was covered with the covering on her face. So the Rashi is saying, based of course on the sages, that the covering here, they want to make a comparison of the way this extra strap of the 11 Yeriot Izim, which are above, is compared to a modest dressing woman, in particular a kala. So what's going on here? What is this 10 of the under straps of the covering, which is called the Mishkan, and the 11 of the Yeriot Izim, which are called ohel? They gained the term as being an ohel. Okay, an ohel means a covering, but really the oil should have been the underneath one. But this one, Izim, gains the title. So we like to go into a few details and then show how it's connected. There's a number 10 and there's number 11. Now, Rav Nosson in Likutey Halachot, bringing sources from the Kabbalah, he connects these 11 straps of the Yeriot Izim from the goat skin, from the goat hairs, to the 11 fragrances of the Ketoret. Both have a similar job. The job of the Ketoret is to be able to smash into the domain of evil and extract holiness that's trapped there and bring it back to its source. To bring life to the holiness that's been stolen, that's there, to extract it and elevate it. Now the covering of the Yeriot Izim, also the Kabbalists teach serve that purpose, in that they're also to protect any foreign influences who try to gain spiritual energy from the tabernacle and to bring it to the Tumah. The Yeriot Izim stand in their way, because don't forget, the Yeriot Izim are exposed to the rest of the world. That is what we see from the outside, if we were in the desert at the time of the tabernacle, are the 11 Yeriot Izim. And don't forget, the Jews were traveling in the desert, and the desert is a place where there's a lot of evil to be found. There's snakes and scorpions. An idea of a midbar is like a place that connotes that there's no holiness here, that there's only impurity. Demons and evil is to be found in places where people are not to be found. That's the idea of the deserts and the snakes and the scorpions, etc. So there is spiritual energy, evil in the desert. Protection is needed, not that they should gain any access to the holiness of the tabernacle, and that's what the Yeriot Izim did. The word Izim, which is goats, is rooted also for azut, brazenness. There's azut dikdusha, brazenness of holiness, and there's azut panim, someone who's chutzpah on a negative sense. Okay, in this case, the Yeriot Izim were 11 to correspond to the 11 fragrances of the Ketoret, which counter the evil. Evil is considered to be the number 11. Like we see, there were 11 alufim of Esav, chieftains of Esav. Esav's descendants had 11 groupings, 11 tribes, if you want to call it, alufim, the alufei Esav. They were 11. Why? 11 is associated with evil. Why is that? Because just like you have 10 levels in holiness, 10 sfirot, 10 utterances, there's the number 10 connotes kedusha, holiness. That's why a quorum, a minyan, is of 10 people. But the evil also has corresponding to also 10. But how does the evil of 10 gain, it's called in the Kabbalah, Asara Kitrin Dim Sa'avuta, the 10 crowns of impurity. How do they gain access to their nourishment from holiness? From number 11. Number 11 is considered the gateway from evil to snatch and to steal from holiness. It's like a conduit. Like we saw in Purim, Haman's 10 sons and Haman himself. So that's the idea of the 11 fragrances of the Ketoret to counter evil, which is 10 plus 1. That's why 11 is needed. And that's why these 11 Yeriot of Izim, of goat skins, were necessary to counter the negative force of 11. And this is also why they correspond to the Ketoret, which also has 11 fragrances also. 10 nice smelling, sweet smelling fragrances. And number 11 was the Chelbina, the Galbanim, which had a very bad stench. But the Ketoret is so powerful, it's even though there's a bad stench in the Chelbina, when it's mixed with the other 10 good fragrances, it's batel. It loses its bad fragrance and becomes a force for extraction. Okay, it allows the 10 of holiness to go into evil and then to extract and come back. The Zohar teaches, and the Kabbalists teach, that the Ketoret is like chains, like rings of chains connected, and it's being lowered into like the domain of evil, and it does the extraction and then pulls back up the holiness that was stuck there. Okay, they work together. The idea of Qatar in Aramaic, Ketoret is like a chain connector. They're all connected. Okay, so the 11, they serve the purpose to extract holiness that has fallen into the domain of evil. That's the idea of the upper covering of the Yeriot of the Mishkan. Now, what's the lower one? The Mishkan itself. There's 10 here. There's 10. Why isn't there 11? 10 is the essence of holiness itself. The essence of holiness has to be covered and protected, so that there should be no accessibility at all whatsoever. So it's covered up totally. On the outside, no one sees the any trace of the 10 lower Yeriot, which of the Mishkan, which were inside only. These 10, believe it or not, they correspond to a deeper level of holiness. The essence of holiness, which is it's called the essence of the Jew himself. In other words, there's holiness, which is deeds or misdeeds, which lead to a person causing holiness to be trapped. But there's unfortunately a deeper level, which is associated with sexual transgressions, pgam habrit, where not just the kedusha gets trapped, but the essence of the Jewish neshama itself falls into the domain of holiness. Just like unfortunately wasted seed does that the actual souls are trapped in the evil, and they have to be extracted before they themselves become demons and part of the evil domain. That's why sexual blemishes is so severe, because it takes the essence of holiness itself and transforms it into evil. The source of holiness being, in other words, Jewish souls, which are now trapped, they themselves have to be extracted before they agree to be demons and to stay there. So Rav Yonatan Eibshitz, he's the one who explains this beautifully. He explains, and we mentioned this in previous classes, that when in Parshat Pinchas, or the end of Korach, you had the tribe of Shimon who blemished, Zimri ben Salu, he had illicit relationships with the Cosbi, one of the daughter of the kings of Moab, and also the tribe of Shimon became involved in immorality, and Pinchas had to save the day. So the question asked me, how come then Moshe didn't order to activate the Ketoret, the incense? Just like if you recall, by the machloket of Korach, when there was the strife of Korach and damage done, and the angel of death was going to kill Jewish people because of the plague. In other words, because of the strife introduced by Korach and his Eidah. So Moshe told Aaron, quick, take the pan, put the Ketoret incense, and it says Aaron stood between those who were dead and those who were alive. But Ta'atzar Magif was able to stop the plague, because the Ketoret was able to stop damage done by Jews. In other words, Jews causing damage, causing Kedusha to be trapped. But on a deeper level, when now Zimri was of Cosbi, and now actually doing sexual immorality, and that thus causing seed to be trapped, Jewish souls to be trapped in the evil domain, here, Rav Natan Abshit says, the Ketoret doesn't work. Why? Ketoret only works if there's a connector, like chains, like we said. But once the chain is broken, the Ketoret cannot work. There's a limitation for how much the Ketoret can work, and that's when it reaches the area of sexual purity and immorality. That's the border. It can't help anymore. That's where it stops. So what's needed? A more profound, deeper level of holiness, the root of holiness itself, which Rabbi Nachman calls, based on the Zohar, the 10 types of melody, Asara Minei Negina, which are rooted in the 10 utterances, in the 10 sfirot, the 10 levels of energy at the beginning of creation. That's the idea of the 10 psalms written by King David, which correspond to the 10 types of melody. These are covered because they need to be protected in modesty. When, God forbid, the damage is done on an external level, then we activate the number 10 of the Yerot, the 10 types of melody. So to go back, the Mishkan itself, which translates as Hashem's dwelling place, is by the 10 Yeriot of the lower Mishkan, from the beautiful decorations of the threads, etc., etc. They correspond to the 10 types of melody, which is for real serious cases. They're covered up. They're protected by what? By the external one, which is called the 11 Yeriot Izim, which are called the Ohel. They serve as a protection that a person shouldn't fall to need to activate the 10 types of melody. Okay, this is hinted to in a verse. Oz vehadar levusha vatischak leom acharon. Oz, which means, the verse translates, Oz, it's a verse from Proverbs. Her Oz vehadar levusha, her garment is that of Oz, which is strength, brazenness of holiness, and Hadar, which is like splendor, is her garment, and she has the last laugh. Vatischak leom acharon. This is hinting to the Yeriot Izim. The word Izim, like we said, on the side of holiness, is the concept of Oz, strength. So, like we said, Rashi said, it's folded to be compared to the modesty of a Kala. The Kala herself, she's the woman, right? And the covering is considered what's protecting her. The modesty that she's expressing is a protection. It's a protection of who she actually is. Okay, she's a kala. She's supposed to be beautiful and expressive, but there's modesty to protect that. So the idea of the external Yeriot Izim is the idea of the Ketoret, which when activated on a daily basis, which is why we daven in every davening, Shachar and Mincha, we do say the Ketoret, because this, like Rabbi Nachman teaches, Rav Nosson explains, activates simcha. When there's simcha, there's kedusha. When there's kedusha and simcha, then that's a protection not to fall to any sexual transgressions. However, if that's broken, then that leads the way to, God forbid, a blemish on a deeper level of sexual transgressions, and then one needs to activate the 10 types of melody. So going back, the tabernacle had these two coverings, 11, the upper one, to correspond to the protection of the 10 fragrances of the Ketoret, activated on a national level at the tabernacle with the 11 layers, the 11 straps of the covering of the Izim, and that covering over a deeper, powerful force, which needed only when the top one can't do the job anymore. The idea of the spiritual energy of protection. The bottom one corresponds to the actual 10 types of melody. So in this we see that the Mishkan itself had this protective measure in it. On a deeper level, the Mishkan, Rabbi Nachman teaches in lesson 70, the Tzaddikim are called Mishkan. Why? Because they have what's called Koach HaMoshech. Moshech, which is like Mishkan, means the power of gravity. The Tzaddikim have in their power to draw the gravity, meaning that to draw the divine presence to them, and also to draw people back to Hashem. So the Mishkan, which is a higher level of moral purity, that corresponding to the 10 types of melody, which activate moral purity, which rescue anything trapped to bring lost souls back in. Those are the 10 types of melody that's expressed in the 10 Yeriot of the Mishkan, the lower coverings. That corresponds to the Tzaddikim who have this power. Above them, covering them, around them, are the disciples. If you want to say that they correspond to the 11 fragrances that they can protect. Rav Nosson writes that the number 11 is associated with Yosef HaTzadik because he was the 11th son of Yaakov Avinu, and descended from Yosef HaTzadik comes Yoshua Benu, the disciple. So the 11 is the idea of the disciples who work day in, day out struggle to maintain simcha, to maintain extracting from the evil holiness trap there by being besimcha, they correspond to the 11, and they surround the disciples, they surround and protect, if you want to say, the tzaddikim, or on a more powerful level. That it shouldn't be necessary to come to that level of having to activate the tzaddikim to fight the battle at that level. Rather, that the students should be activating the number 11 of the Ketoret, which is the 11 Yeriot Izim, in order to maintain a stability of simcha and Am Yisrael. So bottom line is, the Yeriot Izim activate simcha. Oz v'hadar levusha, her garment is out of Oz, which is like Yeriot Izim, v'tischak le'omacharon, and they cause to have the last laugh. The evil is always laughing at us. Ha ha ha, we stole from you, we bring you down, you Jews, you're in exile, we'll break you. But we have the last laugh. That's because we have the access to the Ketoret. Ketoret is always, whatever damage is done by the evil, the Ketoret goes in and extracts holiness trap there, and thus bringing back simcha to its rightful place. So with that, we have simcha. So the Yeriot Izim, on a practical level, represent the idea of simcha, and the lower Mishkan is the tzaddikim who require our protection of our work to do our job of the Ketoret, and that helps to maintain the holiness of the tzaddikim to do their job and bringing back Am Yisrael back to Hashem. We should be zoche. This is a bit deep, but we should be zoche to actually actualize these ideas in our lifetime. Shabbat Shalom and Chodesh Tov.